Somebody said, when mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And so here's Elijah, God's servant, the man who had called down fire, the man who had prayed and brought somebody back to life, the man who had called on God's miraculous power time and time again. He runs and falls down under a juniper tree and said, Lord, take my life. All right. Well, let me tell you something. All of us, sooner or later, gonna have a juniper tree experience. How many times have you seen a doctor tell somebody they got cancer and they just give up and die? How many couples have walked away from their marriages because somebody told them they weren't going to make it? How many young men failed to succeed because somebody said, you ain't going to be nothing, you just like your old daddy? How many girls walking around with a low self-esteem because somebody told them, you're not cute enough, you're not smart enough, you're too dark, your lips are too thick, your hips are too wide, you're not going to be anything. They're walking around sad, having a juniper experience. You see, the devil would tell you, it's enough now. You've been going to the doctor long enough, it's enough now. You've been hurting and suffering long enough. It's enough now. You've been looking for a job long enough. It's enough now. You've been lonely and by yourself waiting for somebody to come and nobody's come. It's enough now. The devil would tell you, you've been going through this long enough. It is enough. And Elijah said, it's enough now. I'm through trying. I'm not going to do it anymore. Has anybody here ever felt like giving up? God gave up. Elijah gave up on God. But God didn't give up on Elijah. I'm so glad that when I walked away from the church, and I let go of God's hand, God didn't let go of my hand. How many know God will hold on to your hand? Oh, I'm so glad. I remember I said, when I get grown, my mama had me in church every Sunday, every Wednesday, every Friday. I thought I lived at church. I said, when I get grown, when I get big enough and old enough to do what I want to do, I ain't going to church no more. And I walked away from the church. Started doing anything and everything I thought I wanted to do. But I'm so glad that God didn't walk away from me just because I left him. He brought me back. He waited for me. So why are we so impatient with everybody else? You want them to change right now. I told you once, I ain't fooling with you no more. I'm so glad God could have got him some new folk. He said he can raise up stones better than us. But I'm so glad he waited on me and was patient with me and gave me time and then brought me back in and cleaned me up, fixed me up, turned me around, put my feet on solid ground, put my feet on a path called straight, and then he walks with me every day, talks with me every day, tells me I'm his own. And so Elijah gets here under this juniper tree, and Elijah goes to sleep. And while he's asleep, God sends an angel with some bread and some water. And the angel woke him up and said, Elijah, arise and eat. This was the third time that God fed Elijah by a miracle. When he was in the wilderness, God sent him some bread by some ravens. When he was at the widow's house, God kept multiplying the meal. And now God's divine catering service cooked some bread in the wilderness, sent him some graham crackers from heaven. And he said, arise and eat. And Elijah did get up and ate. Then he laid back down and went back to sleep. Then the angel came the second time and said, Elijah, wake up. Arise and eat. Because you got a journey ahead of you. And Elijah did get up. And Elijah did eat. And Elijah traveled for 40 days till he came to Mount Horeb. Now Mount Horeb is where Moses saw the burning bush. Mount Horeb is where Moses received the law from God. Mount Horeb is where God brought the water out of the rock when Israel was thirsty. And Elijah gets to Mount Horeb, but instead of looking for God, he goes into a cave. You see, he was covered by the cave, but he was outside the will of God. How many folk walking around right now, but they in a cave? In a cave of depression. In a cave of loneliness. In a cave of fear. In a cave of frustration. A whole lot of folk are walking around on the outside, but they all caved up on the inside. Yeah, they're free on the outside, but on the inside, they in a cave. God can't use you while you're in a cave. God don't need cave men or cave women. So here's this mighty man of God hiding in a cave. And God spoke to Elijah and said, Elijah, what are you doing here? And Elijah started his speech. Elijah said, Lord, I've been working for you. I've been doing everything you told me to do. I moved at your command. But Israel has broken your covenant. They've torn down all the altars. And now they're after me. They want to take my life. And so God spoke to Elijah again and said, Elijah, come out of the cave and stand on your feet. You need to come out of your cave and stand on your feet so God can talk to you. And so Elijah came out of the cave and went and stood on the mountain. And God passed by. But when God passed by Elijah, there was a great wind began to blow. A wind so strong that the rocks began to crack. When God passed by Elijah, the earth began to quake. And the earthquake was so great that the mountains began to move. When God passed by Elijah, a fire came down from heaven. A fire so hot that the rocks began to melt. But God was not in the wind. God was not in the earthquake. God was not in the fire. God came to Elijah in a still small voice. He was trying to teach Elijah a lesson that God don't have to do big things. God ain't got to do sensational things. God ain't got to turn things upside down. God didn't speak in the wind. God didn't speak in the earthquake. God did not speak in the fire. But God spoke to Elijah in a still small voice. He said, Elijah, what are you doing here? What are you doing here in this cave? What are you doing here in this casino? What are you doing here in the nightclub? What are you doing here in this depression? What are you doing here with your head hanging down? to Elijah in a still, small voice. And just like Elijah, we've got to learn that God don't have to do no big things. God ain't got to do no spectacular things. We think our annual days got to be big. They got to be spectacular. They got to draw a big crowd. And folk want to brag about how much money they raise. They want to brag about how good we look. They want to brag about how sensational and dynamic the speaker was. But God ain't interested in turning heads. God trying to turn some hearts. Nobody ever brag about how many folk got saved on an annual day. How many hungry folk we fed on an annual day. How many sick and in prison we went to on an annual day. We like to specialize in the sensational. We like to see big things. We think if God ain't doing a big thing, then God ain't working on our behalf. But God had Elijah know, I don't have to do big things. I can work in a still, small voice. Jesus didn't come to save sinners with miracles. Yes, he fed the hungry, but that didn't save nobody. He gave sight to the blind, but that didn't save nobody. He made the lame to walk and the dumb to talk, but that didn't save nobody. Y'all know he called Lazarus back from the grave, had laid there for 4 long days, but that didn't save nobody. Jesus didn't come to save with miracles, but he came to save with his word. Just his word. Just a still, small voice. Somebody here might be like Elijah. You might feel like giving up. You've been suffering a long time. It seems like all of hell's powers been released against you. And the devil is telling you it's enough now. You don't have to take this no more. Why don't you just give up and die? Have you ever felt like giving up? Well, I'm here to remind you that you are not by yourself. You're not the only one that felt like giving up. When Israel complained against Moses, because they didn't have no meat, Moses said, God, take my life. Moses felt like giving up. When Jeremiah was put into prison for preaching God's word, he said, I won't speak no more. He felt like giving up. When Jonah preached to Nineveh and Nineveh repented, Jonah felt like giving up. When David committed adultery and then had the man killed, he felt like giving up. When Peter denied Christ, not once, not twice, but 3 times, he felt like giving up. When John the Baptist, the one that baptized Jesus, when they locked him up in the jail, he told his disciples to go and ask Jesus, are you the one, or should I look for another? He felt like giving up. Even Jesus knows what it feels like when you feel like giving up. When he was in the garden that night and all the disciples went to sleep, he said, Father, if it's possible, can you take this cup away?